Well, we're nowhere. That's the bottom line. He doesn't seem to understand that you can print money, but you can't print energy or materials. You can't print minerals. We're conjuring up wealth out of nothing. We just print money. And he thinks that that's the same thing that he's dealing with right now. It won't work. It's dangerous. And that's going to crash us at some point. The other thing I think that we have to keep in mind is that if you're President Trump right now, you're trying to convince everybody on Wall Street, as well as everybody who's willing to listen to you anymore, that this is a mini war. In other words, don't worry about it. We've got it under control. We'll manage it. There's nothing really that the Iranians can do anymore. This will end when we decide to end it. In the meantime, by all means, continue to trade your stocks and bonds. Don't be concerned about this. This is not a major event. Well, that's nonsense, as you and I both know. What Iran has proven is that they can be very effective and they don't really need a Navy per se or an Air Force. They've got the ability with terrestrial-based and space-based intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance to see persistently everything that happens in the Gulf region and around their country. And they can target instantaneously with data that comes from satellites right down to the weapon system. And that is deciding the outcome. And the place is too big to invade. We don't have 1 million men standing around waiting to be shipped out to go somewhere and do anything. So the whole business is a fraud. And what he's trying to do is convince everybody it's not. None of this is going to work. And again, you can't print the diesel that moves your trucks. You can't print the fertilizer that grows your crops. You can't print the natural gas that powers your factories. So America had better wake up. We better find a way around this or out of it, because our business strategies cannot easily account for physical scarcity of food, feed, fuel, and fertilizer caused by these shipping closures. It's a catastrophe on a global level. It hasn't hit us dramatically yet, but you and I know over the next 60 days, it's going to be hell to pay here inside the United States. Well, Americans aren't aware of it, but 70% of our farmers have already said they can't even afford to buy fertilizer anymore. That's how high the price of fertilizer has risen. Now, the president was warned about this, believe it or not, back in March. And what happened? He ignored it. You know, when FDR did many things, I wouldn't have agreed with much of what he did. But on the other hand, he was very good at going to the American people and making the case. Even Lyndon Johnson made a stab at it. Certainly President Nixon found it necessary, and he did it. And that's one of the reasons he was reelected in a landslide. He's not doing his job as president, leading this country. That's the biggest issue right now. And again, where is the strategy? What is the strategic framework? And our friends, by the way, in Asia are the people who are being hurt badly by all of this. I predict that before this is over, the Koreans and the Japanese will be inviting us to pack our things and get out of their countries, just as the Germans now are effectively saying the same thing. Well, you and I know from experience that leaving Europe, frankly, is long overdue. We should have gotten out of these places a long time ago. Our presence there has been somewhere between a crutch for many of these countries and their economies, and frankly, a burden. You know, how much of each it is depends on where you are. But the point is, it's unnatural. And everybody keeps saying, you know, what do you think the president's doing? And then you have these poor, pathetic souls sitting on the sidelines like, it's part of a plan. We're harming China. Really? I don't think so. I think a lot of people are losing, but China's not one of them, and certainly not Russia. Russia is profiting from a cash bonanza. The only thing in Russia that the Russians want to know is why the hell Putin isn't ending this war once and for all. They're all sick of it. They want him to crash all the way to the Dnieper River, cross it, take Odessa, seize Kharkiv, march on Kiev, and get it over with. He's not going to have a partner in the United States. We're not going to help. The Europeans are sick of it. Their governments are teetering on the edge of disaster. They're going to fall. So Russia should take advantage of this, but they're not thus far. They're sitting around waiting to see what happens next. Big mistake. And these little incremental moves of 40 kilometers, 50 kilometers. Come on. That's not how you win a war. You may win a battle that way, but you're not going to win the war. So it's really strange right now. But the notion that somehow or another we're coming out of this smelling like a rose must mean that no one has a sense of smell. Well, what you're saying is, which happens first? Do we collapse financially here at home first, or do we essentially recognize the futility of our military operations overseas first? I have this terrible sinking feeling it's going to happen simultaneously. I don't know if it'll be in June or July or maybe earlier. We're going to wake up and discover that the stock market has lost 40, 50, 60% of its value. And anybody you want to pick will talk about this, whether it's Luke Groman or Ray Dalio, any number of people that have looked at this carefully and they know it's coming. So that could happen anytime. And at the same time, most of these exotic munitions, these precision guided weapons and missiles, they're going to be exhausted in the space of anywhere from 5 days to 10 days, unless you start ratcheting back or reducing your operational tempo. So they're both going to happen, I think, because I still don't see how President Trump does not escalate at this point, because the alternative for him is humiliation. Perhaps he's nostalgic for the imperial past. You know, after the Spanish-American War, we made two huge mistakes. One mistake was we stayed in the Philippines when there was no real reason for us to do so. The only thing we wanted to do was establish a coaling station in those days, a place where our ships could come in and reprovision. We ended up instead replacing the Spaniards as the imperial power. We ended up fighting a civil war there that lasted for years, killed 250,000 Filipinos pointlessly, at least that many. And we annexed Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico costs us billions and billions of dollars every year. We don't profit from it. They're not growing anything down there that makes money. They don't have any mineral wealth. Now, we stayed there presumably because, again, this would be useful to the Navy. And then for a while, we had a firing range down there. Puerto Rico should be given its independence. It's not part of our country. This is another legacy of 19th century thinking and imperialism. I still think that the best trade we could possibly have made is to offer Denmark Puerto Rico in exchange for Greenland. The Danes love that nice weather down there. Next thing you know, it would be the super destination for everybody in Scandinavia and Northern Europe every year. We haven't been able to do that, but they probably could. You know, bottom line, this is all silly nonsense. We shouldn't be meddling in anybody else's country anymore. People have the right to govern themselves however they like, provided they're not trying to kill us. And if they're not trying to kill us, what difference does it make to us how they govern themselves? But that's very different from, you know, I'm the greatest, we're the best, and everybody has to do what we say, which I guess is Trumpism. We have to ask the question, why are we creating this illusion? Is this to enable the president to say, the strait is now open, we've proven this, there's no longer any requirement for us to be engaged here, and we're leaving? Is this his declare victory and leave moment? I don't think anybody's going to be fooled. How many ships went through on a daily basis until the war began? Well, we know that. We're not going to get close to it. How many barrels of oil came out of the strait every day? 13 to 15 million barrels a day? We're not even close to that. And then we have the problem inside the Gulf of oil production itself. I think what everybody is learning is a very hard lesson. Remember, we used to hear everybody talk about just-in-time logistics. I think that's going to change now. We're talking about just-in-case logistics, where boardrooms become war rooms, and everybody is going to stockpile everything from oil to rare earths, preferably refined rare earths, all forms of liquefied natural gas, uranium. We go down the list, phosphates, aluminum, so forth. I think everybody is going to start down this road of just-in-case logistics, because if you don't, you have no control over the destiny of your own country, because the countries all run on the same thing. It's called energy. And for energy to be efficient and effective and keep your society healthy, it has to be cheap. We've now made it prohibitively expensive. And watching the price of oil on a given day fall back is people on Wall Street that are out of touch with reality. They don't understand military operations, and they believe whatever the president says. That's the only way to explain it. And a lot of people in Wall Street think, well, eventually the Navy, the Marines here, they'll just take the strait. They don't even understand it geographically. They don't understand the military challenge that exists. So when these things begin to sink in, you'll also have the pain here in the United States increase, because our stocks are way below what is required to make this country run effectively. We know that California in particular is very, very vulnerable. They're dependent on foreign oil imports. We don't have pipelines that run from the East Coast to the West Coast to ensure that we can provide gasoline inside the United States to places like California. We don't have it. The bottom line is everything is going to get worse. Prices are going to rise. Inflation is going to increase. And pretty soon we're going to have shortages in food as well as the energy. And remember, the economy runs on cheap energy and cheap credit. If energy isn't cheap, credit's not cheap, because yields go up. When bond yields go up, you've got a problem. We can't afford them. That's where we're headed. I don't know what the magic number is. I've long thought that 5% on the 10-year bond yield was probably the ceiling that would collapse the whole system. We'll see. I'm surprised we're not already there, but we'll get there. And in the meantime, keep in mind, the rest of the world is de-dollarizing. They're dumping dollars. China is dumping dollars. Japan now is in a currency crisis. It's trying to defend the yen. Pretty soon to do that, they're going to have to sell off our treasuries. The world then is going to go in what direction? To the yuan. That's where business is going to be done. Now, we can scream and holler and protest. We can threaten and cajole, but that's where we're headed. And China is going to become a safe haven for wealth, which is something that I didn't expect to see in my lifetime. Well, it's not just China's resistance to what we're trying to do to them and to the business partners they have around the world. You've also got the port. It's on the Pakistani coast. It lies on the Indian Ocean, called Gwandar or Gwandahar. And this port was built literally at the cost of several $1 billion by China. And it's roughly 54 to 55 miles from the border with Iran. Trucks can move anything that comes into that port in Pakistan along that road straight into Iran. And that's what's happening. Now, the question that will come up undoubtedly is the United States Navy going to now blockade that port? Or are we going to actually attack that lifeline that is being built from that port up into Iran? I would say those are very dangerous things to do because that could bring you in direct military confrontation with China. But the bottom line is China is going to continue to provide Iran whatever it can because Iran is an important business partner in terms of the resources, particularly oil and gas and so forth, that it exports to China. But I think the view in Beijing and increasingly the view in Moscow is that if you don't stand up to the United States at this point and you don't back the people who are resisting them, the United States are going to turn on others, and eventually the United States is going to turn on you. So I see no end to this that is going to be profitable or advantageous for us. But we know the president and the way he thinks, and I don't see him willingly disengaging from this unless he can call it, quote unquote, a win.